Okay, so we're going to dive into the story of this one family. But what's so cool about it is that their lives, they really help tell the much bigger story of how America was even built in the first place. You know, when you think about who really builds a nation, who comes to mind? It's probably the big names, right? The famous generals, the presidents, the guys who signed all the important papers. But what about everybody else? What about the people whose names never made it into the history books? The ones who actually fought the battles and built the communities? Because really, the true story of history is often hidden in the lives of ordinary people who are living through these absolutely extraordinary times. People just like Thomas Dill from Cape Cod, Massachusetts. His life is like a window that lets us see what it really took to create the United States. So let's start at the beginning. We're going to meet Thomas Dill and the woman he'd eventually marry, Hannah Horton. And you'll see that even before they met, their lives were linked by a kind of hardship that was, well, incredibly common back then. And this really hits you with just how tough life was in the 18th century. I mean, think about it. Thomas, he was completely orphaned at just 6 years old. And Hannah, she lost her father at 10. Can you even imagine? That kind of loss so young, it's got to shape everything about who you become. And this was the world they grew up in. Cape Cod wasn't just a backdrop. It was a huge part of their story. It was this pretty isolated place where everything, and I mean everything, revolved around the sea. And those growing tensions with Britain, they weren't some far-off political debate. You could feel it in the air, in the ports, on the fishing boats. It was getting louder every single year. So, as things started to heat up, the call to action got stronger. And Thomas, now a young man, around 20, stepped out of that small coastal world and right onto the stage of history. He was going to fight for a brand new nation. Now, his service wasn't some quick, heroic moment. No, it was a long, tough commitment. He spent a whole year as a private on land, way out in the lakes region of New York, so far from the ocean he knew. Then he actually signed on for naval duty. He served on a ship called the Sophia Defiance, doing the really important but totally unglamorous job of hauling flour to feed the Continental Army. So for 20 months, that's almost 2 years of his youth, Thomas Dill wasn't at home. He wasn't fishing or farming. He was putting his life on the line for the idea of American independence. So after the war, Thomas heads back home to Cape Cod. But you know what? The fight was far from over. Now the battle was to build a life, to build a family with Hannah, all during these really shaky, economically tough first few years of the United States. They got married in 1782. He was about 27, she was 21. And get this, in just over a decade, they had 9 children. 9! I mean, just try to wrap your head around the sheer intensity of that life. Bringing 9 children into the world in only 11 years. That's not just a number. That is a constant, relentless cycle of pregnancy, childbirth, and taking care of infants, all without any of the modern medicine we take for granted. It was incredibly difficult and dangerous. And the physical toll was just immense. Tragically, Hannah's guys was cut short. She died when she was only about 35 years old, probably not long after their 9th child was born. And just like that, Thomas was a widower at 41. Left alone to raise at least 6 kids, from teenagers all the way down to toddlers. So decades fly by. Thomas does remarry, his kids grow up, they start their own families. But like so many other veterans from the Revolution, Thomas finds himself old, unable to work, and needing help from the very country he'd fought to create. And getting that help wasn't easy. It was this multi-year ordeal. At 62, he had to travel all the way to Boston just to apply. 2 years after that, he had to file a sworn statement saying he was basically penniless, that he owned nothing. And it wasn't until he was almost 80 years old that his pension, for $8 a month, was finally approved. And this quote, wow, this is from his actual application. I am now 62 years old, and by reason of my reduced circumstances in life, I need the assistance of my country for support. I mean, that just says it all, doesn't it? It's so raw. Here's a guy who gave his youth, his strength, for this new country. And now, in his old age, he has to basically ask for help just to get by. Thomas managed to live to the incredible age of 84. But if you were to go looking for some big monument to him on Cape Cod, you wouldn't find it. In fact, historians have never found a single gravestone for him, or for either of his wives. You know, he didn't leave behind a formal will or any property records. which tells us he probably lived a very modest life from start to finish. There was no big fortune, no great estate to pass on. No, their real legacy, their true legacy, was something so much more powerful. It was alive. It was carried on by the children and the grandchildren they raised, who took the story of Thomas and Hannah and scattered it across a growing America. Just look at this. Through the kids who survived into adulthood, this massive family tree just started to explode, branching out from Cape Cod to Boston, even down to New Jersey. Every single name you see here represents another family, another story, another chapter. So, you see, their legacy wasn't made of stone. It was made of people. It was a living, breathing family of more than 30 grandchildren who made sure that the story of that orphan boy who fought for his country and the young woman who built a family with him, well, that their story would not be forgotten. Thomas and Hannah Dill's lives are such a powerful reminder that history isn't just made by a few famous people. It's built piece by piece, day by day, by ordinary people facing down these huge, extraordinary challenges. It kind of makes you wonder, right? Who are the unsung founders in our own past? What stories does your own family's history tell about how this nation was made?